Aren't you thankful for the Word of God, that the Word God gives us through Scripture and how it has power to speak newness and life to us? And as we're looking at Unfollow, we've been looking at voices that are worth listening to, and today is about ditching the unexamined path. When you follow daily the voice of life, you change. You're different. It flows from how you see God to how you see others, to how you see the world. And it's so crucial that we listen to the right voices, and also that we unfollow destructive and untrue and unreliable ones. So today, the voice that we're ditching is the unexamined path, that kind of solo, Lone Ranger path that says, I can do this on my own, I can listen to myself, I don't need anybody else. I do know that with so much opportunity in this world for hurtful, destructive voices, it's awfully tempting to go it alone, isn't it? Like it feels like it's easier instead of being vulnerable or listening to voices that end up hurting us or engaging in relationships. It's just tempting to I'll just go it alone and be the only person I trust. But we were not created to live in a vacuum or to go solo. And it's important to examine this life that we're living and to invite voices into that life. And so today I'm going to talk about walking wisdom's path. This is hugely important for us because I believe that at the core, all of us, like, we want a life and a future of hope and peace, right? Like, none of us set out saying, I would like a path that is frustrating and destructive, and I hope I end up in the ditch, and I hope that I don't grow. Like, I don't think any of us head out to say that. In fact, we read verses, where, like in Jeremiah, for instance, it's like this well-known verse that says that God knows these plans he has for us, right? Plans to give us a hope and a future. And we say, that sounds great. I don't think anybody says, like, no, I'm good. Like, that's what we want. And it's exciting to think that God has a hopeful future for us. And so we want to walk a path that leads to goodness, to a life that is more designed how we were to live. But the truth is this, that between here, that desire, and there is wisdom's path. And that is a path where you are looking at your life, you're looking at your heart and your actions and attitudes, and you're examining it. It's one that's thought through, one that has the input and advice of not only the Lord, but how he often uses that is friends and others. And the way that we walk today will tell us a lot about how we get there. And so I'm starting with this thought that most of us want to get there. And I don't mean there like this perfect life that's, in 90 days. I just mean that we want a life that we do have a hope and a future, and we're flourishing in the way God designed. We want there. And so the way that we walk today tells us a lot about how we get there. Because there's no shortcuts. There's no elevator up to the floor of a godly life. In fact, I think about story after story in Scripture. Like we think about David, who we just studied a while back, just in late winter. The king of Israel, who saw great and powerful things in his life because of the path he took to get there. Who learned the strength of God even when he was young. We see Joseph, the faithful young man who continued to trust God and live a life of integrity, even though that path took him through misunderstanding and pain and some serious struggle. And even Jesus, who, although we don't know a lot about his early life, what we do see recorded is that he grew in wisdom, and he grew in stature and in favor with God and in favor with others. So while it's exciting that God has a plan and that we have a hope and that we want, this great future, Wisdom Path says there's a lot for us to learn and grow in order to get there. So we're going to learn about ditching this unexamined path. And what do I mean by that? I'm referring to a life that is full and lived with reflection, with self-reflection. I want to live a life that doesn't just want some kind of feel better about myself religion. And you can find that anywhere. You can find somebody who will tell you this is just how you feel better about life, but nothing really changes. You just kind of feel good, and it almost feeds. It's almost like a dopamine sense of like, oh, I feel better, nothing changes. But if I can just last 6 more days and get to that point where somebody says something and I feel better, but that's not change. That's just a feel better about myself religion. I want to live a life where God is doing something that is changing me from the inside out. I want to live a life that honors him and honors others. I want to live a life that learns to be honest with myself, about myself. That doesn't try and lie about who I am. I want relationships with others that are strong enough to welcome their input. That's hard. That's hard to be willing to have a friendship or a relationship that's strong enough where I welcome input. But here's wisdom's path, Proverbs 14:8. The wisdom of the prudent is to give thought to their ways, but the folly of fools is deception. Now, I don't use words like prudent. In fact, like when I think of prudent, well, this will age me, but I go back to like President Bush. Do you remember? Does anybody remember? Would not be prudent in this juncture? Nobody remembers that? Okay, that's like the last time I heard the word prudent used in conversation ever. So we got to define it. Prudent means acting with or showing care and thought for the future. So it sounds like an archaic word, like prudent, to be prudent, but think about that. Prudent means acting with or showing care and thought for the future. So the wisdom of that kind of life is they're willing to look hard at themselves in the mirror. And that verse also says that the problem with being a fool is that you deceive yourself. And often then don't even realize that you're being one. But when you give thought to your ways, you're open to change and therefore growth. Now I love to see plants grow. I have a love-hate affair with how much rain's happening. But I am grateful for one thing. We need it, for like our stuff to grow. And I love how it's beautiful and green. And I love how happy my wife Christy is when she walks outside and sees her plants that she works so hard on, and they're thriving and growing. And it's because she works really hard, and then the rain does the rest, and the sun, and it's just awesome. Certain kinds of trees need pruning. Without it, they could grow unruly and actually sap all of their potential. So we know that sometimes the best plants, right, are pruned back. And I get excited when I see pruning shears. In fact, when I go to Costco, I get really excited because all the plants, all the fertilizers, all the things that promote growth or stop growth, and then they always have the brand new Fisker shears every year. I'm like, man, those look awesome because you know what those things can do. And I have the ones that are like the big ones that has like an extra hinge inside. If you can get that claw around that branch will not last because it has this extra thing that's stronger than me, and it lops it. So I get excited. Now those things look like a weapon of destruction, but when you use them the right way, they produce the best kind of growth in a plant. And so in the same way, now imagine the plant refusing, like if I went out to trim something and I said, no, you don't need to make these changes. What would happen is it would get overrun and out of control, and eventually it would stop producing fruit, right? And we know this. In fact, we've studied this a few times this year, just looking how fruitfulness comes when we're willing to examine and when we're willing to invite the Lord to look at our lives and have friends willing to say things where when we make changes and let God prune things in our life, we actually become more fruitful. So it boils down to two kinds of path takers. Those who reflect on the path they're taking and invite input, and those who want to do it their way without input. And I've walked both. And I can tell you which one in the short term is easier, but I can also tell you that one in the long term is much harder. It's much harder. Whereas God's way in the short term, man, it's sometimes difficult, isn't it? To be honest with yourself, to invite input, to make change. But in the long run, there is a hope and a future because the wisdom of the prudent is to give thought to their ways. And so I want to talk about taking steps on wisdom's path. And I hope that today that you not only realize the power in examining your life and holding it up before the Lord every day, but the power of an examined life where you invite friends into your life. And I'm thankful. I actually have about a half dozen guys in my life who are willing to tell me things or ask me hard questions or tell me when they think they see something. I don't always like it. I don't even always respond well. But I'm getting much better at it because I see the value in it. And so we're going to talk about taking these steps, all right? And if you're taking notes, there's 4 different ones, which I know I'm speaking and I'm supposed to do only 3, so I'm messing this all up, right? Because that's what preachers do. They have like 3 points and I have 4, so I messed it all up, but we'll get there, right? We'll get there. Number 1, ask yourself, am I willing to listen to others? Am I willing to listen to others? Proverbs 23:19 says, listen, my son, and be wise, and set your heart on the right path. That's the great truth about learning. You can learn anywhere if you're willing to listen. And of course, this takes this humility, and it takes this attitude that says, I don't have it all figured out yet. As much as I know that I don't know some things. And while this can feel like a shot to our pride, it's also very freeing because we can really dig in and learn because there's no need to pretend that you know. It's not just humility, though. It's also how you see others. When you're willing to listen to others, they don't become something that threatens you or threatens your ego. They become a gift to you because they're helping you become who Jesus intended for you to be. So you can begin to see others as a gift. If you think about it, I think about this room, if you just pick one or two people you know here, or if you don't know anybody and you're like, I don't, know many people here, think of 2 or 3 people in your life that you trust. If you add being willing to listen to them, think of how many years compounded of experience that you just brought into your own life if you're willing to listen to people. I'm 45. I was not cognizant of that at a young age. So when did I begin growing? My earliest memory is like 4 years old. And it was only one. I was getting spanked. That sticks with you. From there, I had a few more. But when I really began, when I can think of my memories, I have, 4 decades of experience, compounded experience, that I can look back on. But if I add my good friends in here, if I add my family, suddenly I have hundreds of years of combined experience that I can learn from if I'm willing to listen. And so you have to ask yourself, am I willing? Like, do I see others as a gift that is given to me? Here's a second one. Ask yourself, are my friends encouraged to speak into my life? Proverbs 12:15 says, the way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but a wise man listens to advice. And I love this one as well, Proverbs 24:6. For by wise guidance you can wager war, and in abundance of counselors there is a victory. This is deeper than just being willing to listen, because it's not enough to be willing. We also must be intentional in getting feedback and input about your life. Because you could kind of dodge people all your life and say, I'm willing to listen, as long as I don't go in the place where I have to hear it, right? Oh, I'm willing to listen, but this is so much deeper. Are friends encouraged to speak into my life? I want to wage war on this unexamined life, which means I need people in my circle. So a good thing to think about just right now, and answer it in your head. Don't answer it out loud, but who's in your circle right now that can talk to you about what's going on in your life, help you, stand with you, pray with you, challenge you? If you don't right now have people popping into your head, you might have a problem with an unexamined life. If there's not those people that right away you can say it's this person, it's this person, it's this person. The good news is it doesn't have to stay that way. But if you can't answer those questions, you're going to hit bumps in the road because you don't have somebody right there to invite and to be intentional in speaking, challenging, praying, supporting, encouraging. And so, but like I said, the good news, it doesn't have to stay that way. You just have to find a way to start with some trusted friends, even just get together, pray and talk and say, I want to share what's going on. I want to tell you about my life, my hopes, my dreams, the future I think God has for me, what I'm being challenged by, what I'm encouraged by. This is also important because, and it's so hugely important for me because I think I see. How many of you think you see life pretty well? You can answer that. Okay. And you're like, some of you, you're scared to answer. As well as you think you see, we don't always see. Remember, the way of a fool is right in his own eyes. And that means that I might be wise in some areas, but a fool in others. And I have to be willing to say, I think I see in this, but I could be wrong. And so it's also good that you might need someone to call you out on something. And that's hard to accept sometimes, but I'll tell you what, the times that I've had good friends willing to say the hard thing at the right time. When I listened, it changed my life. It changed my life. And it's so powerful. So don't just answer, am I willing to listen, but also, do I have friends that are encouraged to speak into my life? Number 3, what do I do with what I hear? What do I do with what I hear? Proverbs 10:17 says, he is on the path of life who heeds instruction. But he who ignores reproof goes astray. It's amazing, isn't it, the incredible access we have to information these days. It's more than we've ever had before. In fact, it's mind-boggling. It's mind-Googling. I Google searched the other day. I got on Google and I searched exercise plan, and in 0.65 of 1 second, that's like enough for, that's how long it took me to hit enter, basically. I received 2.2 billion search results. Think about that. That's just the search results of what people have put out into the interwebs for me to see when I put exercise plan. We do not lack information. In fact, there's no time that has so much knowledge right at the fingertips of the world. In fact, I want to go specific on this one for a minute. Little self-revealing, but then you'll have something you can hold me accountable to. You ready? I Googled nutrition. 920 million results in half a second. It's all out there. In fact, let's do a little knowledge test, because I started looking at daily recommended allowance, which is like the worst words ever when you're a lover of all things good and tasty. Daily recommended allowance. Calories. You're supposed to have 2,000 to 2,500 based on whether you're male, female, size, in order to maintain or lose weight. That it changes, right? But that's kind of your ballpark area. Calories from fat, you're supposed to have about 50 to 80. 44 to 77 grams of fat. Saturated fat, never more than 13 grams. I'm going somewhere really bad with this. And I'm inviting you to speak into my life. Just not all at once. Sodium. We're only supposed to have 2,300 milligrams max, and 1,500 is ideal for you. Sugars, 25 to 37 grams. I love Dairy Queen's Flamethrower half-pound grill burger. It's awesome. It's spicy. It's got 2 patties, because who needs just 1 patty? It's awesome. And with it, I like to get the Choco Extreme Brownie Blizzard. It's awesome. If you like chocolate with your chocolate, it's great. So I looked it up. Calories, just the Blizzard, the calories are 800. Calories from fat, 320. 35 grams of fat in it, and 20 of those grams are saturated. 430 milligrams of sodium and 89 grams of sugar. I have eaten this thing so many times. Now let's get to the hard one, the Flamethrower burger, because that was the one that's honestly better for you. Or maybe similar. All I know is there is 1,380 milligrams of sodium in that burger, along with 25 grams of saturated fat and like 980 calories. When you put it together, because I eat these together with fries, because you have to have fries to dip in your Blizzard, right? So, okay. I invite you to speak into my life. Okay, but look at this together. Recommended for my life, 2,500 calories a day. This meal is 1,960. It's almost everything I should have in a day in one little moment of joy. I'm supposed to have 80 calories from fat. This is like 1,000 calories from fat. I'm supposed to have, this is where it gets bad. Like I'm supposed to have 77 grams of fat, no more per day. This thing is 113. And you get almost your complete amount of sodium in this burger alone with fries. And then 98 grams of sugar. I'm just dying. But here's the problem. Now I want a Flamethrower burger. Now I'm like, let's wrap this up. Let's go. It's literally like right across the freeway. I'll meet you there. We'll have fun. But really, think about this. Does having this information change me? Now, the information has the potential to bring change. Does the information itself change me? No, because I have it. I have it. And this is often the problem with people's relationship with faith. When they're looking at Jesus, they think, I have the Bible, I have the information. But see, it's not that we lack information, we lack transformation. And that's not because we lack the availability of what we need to do or what God says about our lives. It's the lack of application of what we need to do in our lives. And so we have all this information. In fact, I would say sometimes it serves to inoculate us from change. Because in our arrogance, we think, I have the truth. I know what's right. I have what's right. And we think that having it means that it is in us, that it has transformed us. God, help us to be humble believers and followers of Christ that say it's not enough to merely know what something says. In fact, James says this way, like, it is what we do. In fact, it's scary. In James 1:22, he says, don't merely listen to the word and deceive yourselves. Do what it says. And so by having it and not obeying it, we lie to ourselves. And so apply what I just said. It's fun to talk about, Flamethrower burgers, and I think that there's there's definitely application in the health of our bodies because God created us all as one being. We're holistic creatures. We're not like spirits where we say, well, I just care about my spirit. Your body is part of your life, and how your body's health reflects in your soul and all that. It's all connected. But what happens when we keep hearing truth but do nothing about it? We settle in and begin to think that we have the truth because we've heard it. And so again, that comes back to this point 3 is, what do you do with what you hear? How do you apply it? What about when the application of truth means you might lose out on something? See, for my body to change, I've got to lose out and stop visiting the queen. The Dairy Queen. But it's true. In order for my life to change, I have to make decisions that means I miss out. But in the same way, when my body begins to feel health and vitality in life, am I missing out on anything? Not long term, only short term. And in the same way, God's desire and to build a hope for the future and a hope for what he is doing in you means short-term losses and long-term joy and hope in who Jesus is building you into. And so this is when the rubber meets the road. Again, going back to thinking about Joseph in the Bible, he was someone who did not always come out on top. But he kept heeding God. He kept living out what he knew was right. And wisdom's path led Joseph to a place that literally saved a nation because he was willing to say, I care more about what God is doing in me than in this moment for myself. And so then number 4, ask yourself, can I take correction? Can I take correction? Proverbs 15:10 says, stern discipline awaits anyone who leaves the path. The one who hates correction will die. I noticed that, and this happened with some of my kids, and this happened with me driving as well, and I recognized it when I drove my kids. When we first started driving, they really wanted to listen to everything I said because they'd never done it, right? But then once they kind of got used to it, they're like, I know. It got harder for them, some of them, to take that correction and listen. And I remember that I'd drive with my dad, and he'd say, you're driving way too close to the ditch. I'm like, I'm fine. And what I realize now is he was really right. And it was because I was so scared of being like close to that center line that I would just hug, and I would almost be in the ditch. But I had driven enough to know that I know. And it became harder and harder for me to take correction. Correction is for your life. It is to bring you life. Like my dad was not out to say, hey, I'm trying to make driving not fun for you, and so get away from the ditch. What he was trying to say is like, I don't want to be in the ditch with you. It's probably what he's saying. But really, he was saying, and one day, if you want to become a driver, you've got to stay in the lines. It's for your life. It's so that you can live. And in the same way, when correction comes, we want to push against it. But really, it's the best thing for us. Because correction is a way, and the idea of discipline, when God disciplines our life or he brings correction, he's bringing life to us. He's bringing health to us. He's saying, this is how you stay on the road. This is how you drive right. I'm not doing this to restrict you. I'm doing this to finally bring freedom. Because nobody sees a guy in the ditch with the end of his car up and his tire flat, and he's waiting on the road calling 911. Nobody drives by that sign and says, man, that guy looks like he is free. He's living in freedom and vitality. No, we say, man, that dude, something happened. And so in the same way, when we allow God to discipline and restrict certain elements of our life, it's so that we flourish. So ask yourself, can I take correction? Now this is hard because sometimes people's versions of correction stinks, or the way they say things hurts, or maybe in all honesty, sometimes they don't know the whole story, and it can be hurtful because it's not completely true. But let me just give you a few questions to ask for yourself, because we can't control other people. In fact, I remember one of the hardest things was when this guy, this other pastor, pulled me aside, and he didn't know me, but I was connected with an organization that he led. And I had a conversation on the phone with one of his workers, and he came and he said, hey, can we talk for a minute? I said, yeah. And he goes, can I speak into your life? And something in me went, oh, here it comes. Like, oh, Lord. And he proceeded to blast me for something that he wasn't a part of or didn't know about, just how terrible I'd done these things and how terrible I communicated with somebody on the phone in his organization, and just blasted me. And all I could think at first was like, I don't remember that conversation even being bad. If she was hurt by things I said, I didn't know it. And I'm trying to rack my brain, what did I say that was hurtful? I said, okay, well, I'll let you know what I said or what I thought I said, or at least where I was going. So we had this conversation, and then he's like, oh, okay. And you can almost tell he's like, oh, maybe I should have not had the flamethrower on full, and we talked it through, but afterwards I thought maybe there's something in me that comes on too strong in a conversation that I need to back up. Maybe I need to think about everything I want to say before that conversation. So I'll tell you what, I think that he came at me, to be honest, really wrong and blasted me in a way he didn't have to, but I still had to stop and say, but what in that could have been right? What in that was true? And we ended up serving on some teams over the years and became friends. And that kind of became something in the rear view, so that was good. But it made these questions be something that I had to learn to ask myself a lot. Is, first of all, regardless of the delivery, is there truth in the package? And that was something I had to ask myself a lot. And it's something that also, if I've had to talk to a friend, my delivery is not always good, but I realize if it's worth talking about, I better try and say it as well as I can. But as far as you can receive it, regardless of the delivery, can you stop and say, but maybe there's truth in this for me to hear? Another good question, am I an approachable person, or do people walk on eggshells around me? Or am I somebody who's approachable, who can be talked to? Do I respond quickly in anger or defensively? Is my favorite Bible verse to quote, do not judge, whenever somebody might have something to say. The truth is this, friends, that God brings correction because he wants us on wisdom's path, because he has a hope and a future for every one of you. But the way there is walking in his ways, is trusting him, it's letting him correct us and do something different in us as we walk. So if we hate correction, we'll only come to the point that we listen to ourselves. And then we're back on that unexamined path. And that's scary. So remember also, if you're on the other side of that, to challenge and give correction in gracious, humble ways. Give room for friends or family to accept or listen or walk that correction out. But at the end of the day, you're responsible to hold your life out to Jesus and to trust him to help you walk wisdom's path. You're responsible for you, and part of that is being willing to hear hard things. And so in closing, I want you to take a challenge this week. The nice thing is it's actually, it's easy to remember. It might not be easy to do, but it's simple. It's the No Lone Rangers Challenge. No Lone Rangers, because you're not designed to walk alone. So here's the No Lone Ranger Challenge. Just two things. This week, intentionally connect with one person. It can be in person or it can be over the phone. Don't do it with text or email. Call them or meet in person. And just share what's going on in your life, share what you're facing, and ask them to pray for your path. Okay? And remember this, and especially if somebody calls you, a lot of times we're not looking for somebody to give us perfect advice. We're looking for somebody to remind us of who we are. We're looking for somebody to remind us of what God can do in us. I don't need you to tell me 10 steps. I just need you to say, Sean, okay, I see this. Don't forget who God is making you. Don't forget what he's doing in you. Don't forget what he says about you. It's so much more important to be reminded of in Christ who we are. And so I hope you take this. I can't make you. Worship team, come on up. But I hope you do. Take this No Lone Rangers Challenge where you connect with one person this week, in person or over the phone, and then you talk about what you're facing, what you're walking through, and then ask for them to pray for your path.